Hello students, welcome to the second part of the video, Fiber to Fabric. In this part, we are going to discuss the process of converting fiber to fabric. Okay, now students, this process is divided into two major steps. Okay, first being fiber to yarn and second being yarn to fabric. Now these steps are further divided into spinning, weaving and knitting. Now we're going to discuss all of these steps in detail. Starting with fiber to yarn. Now this is divided into just one step, that is spinning. The process of making yarn from fibers is called spinning. So we know what is spinning. Spinning is the process of making yarn from fibers. We are making yarn from fibers. But how is it done? In this process, fibers from a mass of cotton wool are drawn out and twisted. This brings the fibers together to form a yarn. Okay, now they're saying that in this process, what is done? For example, I have a cotton ball wool, okay, which has fibers. Now these fibers are drawn out and they are twisted together. Okay, they are twisted together to form a yarn. This is how it is done. Okay, and this process is known as spinning. Okay, now students, how is it done? This is done with the help of a device known as a hand spindle. Okay, just like the one you can see in this picture, this is a hand spindle and it is also known as charkha. Right, this is what is written in the next point. A simple device used for spinning is known as a hand spindle. Okay, spinning of yarn on a large scale. Now we were talking about a small scale before, right? Now we're talking about a large scale. Okay. Spinning of a yarn on a large scale is done with the help of spinning machines. So on a small scale it is done with the help of hand spindle, and on a large scale it is done with the help of spinning machines. After spinning, yarns are used for making fabrics. After spinning, yarns are used for making fabrics. We know that, right? Fibers are converted into yarns, and these yarns after spinning are converted into fabrics, and these fabrics form our clothes, right? Okay, this is another picture of a hand spindle here. Okay, moving further to the next step, which is yarn to fabric. Okay, now this is divided into two steps, which is weaving and knitting. Let's start with weaving first. The process of arranging two sets of yarn together to make a fabric is called weaving. What is weaving? We are arranging two sets of yarn, okay, to make one fabric. Clear? Two sets of yarn to make one fabric is known as weaving. Okay. The yarn are much thinner than paper strips. Okay, very important point. You see how thin these yarns are. These yarns are so thin that they are even thinner than the paper strips. Okay. Weaving of fabric is done on loops. Okay. This is the device that is used to weave clothes. The looms are either hand operated or power operated. That means they are either hand operated or they are machines. Okay. Similarly, hand operated ones are used on a small scale and machines are used on a large scale. Now in this picture here, you can observe that this is a weaving machine. Okay, this is a hand loom. What is it? Hand loom. Okay, and it is weaving different sets of yarns. These are different sets of yarns. Okay, this is one yarn. One strand is one yarn. Okay, these are different sets of yarns that are woven together to form a fabric. Okay, first what we did, we converted fiber to yarn. Now we're converting yarn to fabric. Okay, now another step in this category is knitting. Okay, it is quite similar to weaving, but there is one major difference. Let's see what that is. In knitting, a single yarn is used to make a piece of fabric, whereas in weaving, we used two sets of yarns, right? We used two sets of yarn to make a single fabric, whereas in knitting, we use one yarn to make a piece of fabric. One set of yarn, okay, to make a single piece of fabric, right? Now, socks and many other knitting items are made up of knitting fabrics. Knitting is done by hand and also on machines. Again, as similar to weaving and spinning, it is also done on hand and on machines. Okay, students, now we're going to study the most interesting topic of this video, which is history of the clothing material. Now in this topic, we are going to study how did people from the early ages used to make their clothes. Okay, let's start reading. People in ancient times used the bark and big leaves of trees, animal skin and fur to cover themselves. Now in earlier times, people did not have fabrics or clothes, right? So how did they cover themselves? They used the bark. What is bark? Bark is the skin of the trunk of the trees, the stem of the trees. Okay. And big leaves of trees, animal skin and fur. Fur again is obtained from animals to cover themselves. Okay. After people began to settle in agricultural communities, that is in farming communities, they learn to weave twigs. Now we know what is weaving. We studied it just now, right? They learn to weave twigs. What are twigs? Twigs are small branches. Okay. And grass into mats and baskets. They started to learn how to weave twigs and grass into mats and baskets. Okay. Now, let's talk about early Indians. A very important question can be arised from this point. So just remember this topic. Okay. We're talking about early Indians here. Okay. How did they make fabrics? They made fabrics wore out of cotton. Okay. And they grew that cotton in regions near the river Ganga. Okay, now what question can arise from this? They will ask you, what plant did they use to make fabrics? Okay, and what region was it in which they grew the cotton plant? Okay, so what plant? Cotton plant. What region? Near the river Ganga. Okay, now we're going to talk about another plant which is flax. Okay. Flax is also a plant that gives natural fibers. Now we know what are natural fibers. Okay. These fibers are obtained from plants. Okay. Plants are the sources. Now this picture depicts the flax plant. Okay. And this plant gives fibers. Okay. So this is another 1 mark question. If they ask you, give an example of a plant that gives natural fibers, you will say flax plant. Okay. Now, with the inventions of the sewing needle, this is the sewing needle. people started stitching fabrics to make clothes. Okay, now students, understand this. We know we use fibers to make yarns, and we use yarns to make fabrics, and these fabrics are used to make our clothes, right? But people did not know how to make clothes from these fabrics. So they used something known as this, the sewing needle. Okay, the sewing needle. They started stitching. What is the process here that involves the sewing needle? It is stitching. They started stitching fabrics to make clothes. Okay. Now students, this is the history of the clothing material. This is how people from the early ages started making their clothes. Now in this picture you can see that people are making clothes from this fabric. Right? Okay. I hope this history is clear with you. Okay students, I hope you people have now understood what we discussed in this video, and the chapter Fiber to Fabric is clear to you all. To know more about this topic, you can join the EduRev Infinity Plan, log into your Class 6 Science section, check out the chapter Fiber to Fabric, unlock the locked videos, documents and test series in less than 80 rupees a month. Thank you.